Good day, everyone. Good day, Miss. We are the group reporters of Chapter 5, Theory of Production. I am Mary Grayston, the first. So, what is production theory? Production theory explains the principles in which the business has to take decisions on how much of each commodity it sells, and how much it produces, and how much of the raw materials, fixed capital, and labor it employs, and how much it will be used. It defines the relationship between the prices of the commodities and productive factors, and the quantities of these commodities and the productive factors that are produced on the other hand. Management has been described as decision making. Among the many decisions that managers make are questions about producing a good or service to achieve the goal of earning a profit. The questions include, what product should I produce? Or how should I produce this product? And how much should I produce to maximize? Economic concepts are the following. First, the diminishing marginal productivity. Second is short run and long run. Third, fixed and variable inputs. And fourth is the fixed and variable cost. So, diminishing marginal productivity. It is the understanding that using additional inputs will generally increase output. But there is also a point where adding more input will result in a smaller increase in the output. And there is another point where using even more input will lead to decrease in output. Short run and long run. An assumption is that the manager wants to increase profit as quickly as possible, but this also implies there will not be enough time to increase all inputs. So the business will increase only some inputs. Restated, assuming that the manager wants to increase profit as soon as possible, there is not enough time to change the level of all inputs. Not being able to change some inputs is defined as the short run. Short run, not enough time to change all inputs. The manager will try to change the level of production by changing only the level of variable inputs. There will be both fixed inputs and variable inputs. A fixed input is any input that cannot be changed in the time period the manager is contemplating.
Good morning, classmate. Good morning, Miss. I am Maria Elena E. Suarez, BA Major in Financial Management. Now, I will report Theory of Production. I am the second reporter. Fixed inputs and variable inputs. The short run introduces another economic concept: fixed inputs and variable inputs. As already stated, in the short run, the quantity of some inputs can be changed, but the quantity of other inputs cannot be altered. Economic theory refers to the inputs that can be changed as variable inputs, and the inputs that cannot be altered in this time period as fixed inputs. Variable inputs are the production inputs that can be altered in the short run. For example, the business manager can easily use a greater quantity or a lesser quantity of the input during this production period. Fixed inputs are the production inputs that cannot be altered in the short run, even if the manager wants to use more or less of the input. There is not enough time to change the quantity of the input during this production period. Fixed input versus long-term asset. They are not the same. Fixed inputs are those that cannot be easily altered. For example, land leased on a 3-month basis may be a variable input rather than a fixed input, but land that is leased on a 7-year contract may be relatively fixed. In the first case, the manager could discontinue leasing the land within 3 months, whereas as the second manager is stuck with the land for as long as 7 years, even if the manager no longer wants to use the land. Owned land may be more a variable input than less land. It may be easier to sell a tract of land if it's no longer needed than it may be to get out of a long-term lease agreement. Even though owned land is often used as an example of fixed input, it may not be a fixed asset if there are opportunities to sell in it a short time. A piece of equipment that can be readily sold may be a variable input, whereas a piece of specialized equipment that no one else is interested in buying will be a fixed input. Some labor or workers might be a variable input. Hourly, workers who can be told to stay home today because there is no work for them. Other workers, however, may be a fixed input, such as those who are hired under a several-year contract that need to pay even if there is no work for them. Consider a family business. Is the labor provided by family members a variable input or a fixed input? How easy is to discharge a family member if their labor is no longer needed in the family business? Bottom line, a fixed input is one that is not easily acquired or disposed of, whereas inputs that can be easily bought and sold, even though they have a long useful life, may be viewed as a variable input. Do not confuse the economic definition of a fixed input with an asset that has a long useful life. Fixed input becomes a variable input. Fixed inputs become a variable input as first, the manager extends the time period being considered in the decision-making process. And second, as the input reaches the point that it needs to be replaced. For example, the item of specialized equipment, as suggested above, is a fixed input if there is limited opportunity to sell the item. However, as the item grows old and reaches the end of its useful life, the manager now has opportunity to decide whether to replace it or simply quit using it. At this point, this specialized equipment may shift in the manager's mind from being a fixed input to being a variable input. The description of fixed inputs are addressed again in subsequent sections.
Good day everyone and good day miss. My name is Jemal Wendon Rosar, BSP 1 major in marketing. Variable and fixed cost. The issue of fixed versus variable cost is addressed in more detail and subsequent section. But recognize for now that the cost of fixed input are considered fixed costs and the cost of variable inputs are considered variable costs. Example of costs associated with a fixed input include depreciation, maintenance, interest on debt associated with the asset. An opportunity cost equity invested in the asset. An important characteristic of fixed input is that even if a fixed input is not being used, its costs still being incurred. For example, when a business decided to cease operation, the manager can eliminate the variable cost by the using any of the variable input, perhaps electricity, but the cost associated with the fixed input, which cannot be immediately disposed of, will continue to be incurred by the business, e.g. rent on a long-term lease that cannot be determined even if the business is not producing any product revenue. Production function and state of production. Based on the assumption of goal of profit maximization and making decision in the short run, combined with our understanding of diminishing marginal productivity, the question is what level of input should a manager use and what level of output should the manager produce to maximum profit. The answer for one business will be different than the answer for another business. Each business uses a slightly different combination of inputs to produce similar output. For example, you use a different recipe and a different combination of ingredients than I do. But we both can produce a delicious chocolate cake. Seldom the businesses use identical recipes to produce similar substitutable product. The relationship between the level of variable input and level output can be illustrated with a production function. A table of data can be used to present this relationship. This table does not identify the fixed input, but it indicates how the level of output changes if the manager changes the quantity of variable input used during the production period. In this example, using 2 units of variable input will result in producing 3 units of output. However, using 7 units of variable input during the production period would allow the business to produce 28 units of output. A graph may improve our understanding of the concept. Graph 1. The axis represents the number of physical units used variable input or X and the number of physical units produced output or Y. Total physical product or TPP, quantity of output Y that is produced from a firm's fixed input and specific level of variable inputs X. Production function. Illustrate the relationship between the quantity of variable input and the level of output. The production function can be described as a combination or a series of enterprise analysis wherein each point on the production function represent a different enterprises that is a different recipe of combination of fixed inputs and variable input. The idea that the production function is a series of enterprises expanded on in subsequent section. Profit maximizing quantity of valuable input. The previous page focuses on the relationship between the level of quantity of variable input and the quantity of output or TPP. The discussion also addresses how managers can identify the range of input in which the business will logically what the produce that each stage 2, wherein EPP is declining but MPP is greater than 0. This page discusses how the manager can further then analyze the business to identify the specific level of variable input that will achieve the goal of profit maximization in the short run. The discussion requires that the focus shift from considering the quantity of physical units of variable input and output to considering the cost and revenue associated with the variable input and output. Marginal value products as demand for variable input. Production theory. As the term clearly states, is theory. The challenge with theory can be applying the theory as abstract concept to real situation. For example, how do decision makers use the understanding of production theory to make decisions? This page offers ideas on how to apply or use the concept of marginal value product or MVP. As stated previously, a firm will maximize profit by using quantity of variable input where the cost of the last unit of input or MIC equals the value of the product produced from that unit of input or MVP. If the cost of the variable input rises, or i.e. the MIC goes up, the manager would use less of the input to maximize profit. This is illustrated by intersection of the MIC and MVP curves. As the price of the variable input decreases, the manager will use more units of the variable input to maximize profit. Defining cost. This page defines profit, revenue, and cost, including total cost, average cost, and marginal cost profit. The discussion of production theory is based on the premise that the business manager will decide to pursue strategies and practices that maximize profit. However, the discussion of MVP and MIC on a previous page does not provide enough information to determine profitability. Accordingly, this page describes an analysis whereby profit can be calculated. All the definition is obvious. It is helpful to restate that profit is the difference between total revenue or TR and total cost or total revenue TR. Same as VTV, they are the same, but when illustrated, revenue is measured in the term of the units of output rather than units of input. Now the axis of the graphs are dollars and quantity of output. TR is illustrated as a straight line if perfect computation is assumed. Determining profit, maximizing level level of production, marginal cost and marginal revenue. Maximum profit is the level of output where MC equals MR. As As long as the revenue of production another unit of output MR is greater than the cost of producing that the unit of output MC, the firm increase its profit by using more variable input to produce more output. The law of the reality of diminishing marginal productivity demonstrate that the maximum profit is not maximum productivity. Unless cost of variable input is zero, variable input free, or price of output infinite. Since neither of these likely to occur, we can confidently state that maximum profit is not earned by maximizing production. We stated MC is infinite where production is maximized. MA will need be infinite to maximum profit where production is maximized, since no one will pay us an infinite price for our product. MC will equal MR at a level of production that is less than maximum production.
Good morning everyone, especially to you Miss. We are the group reporters of Chapter 5, Theory of Production. And I'm Juan Carlo Bisubrigari, taking the course of BSBA 1, Major in Financial Management. And I'm the last reporter.
Isoquants are a geometric representation of the production function. The same level of output can be produced by various combination of factor inputs. The locus of all possible combination is called the isoquant. Ang isoquant ay isang geometric na representasyon ng function ng produkto. Ang parehong antas ng output ay maaaring gawin ng iba't ibang kombinasyon ng mga factor input. Ang locus ng lahat ng posibleng kombinasyon ay tinatawag na isoquant. Characteristics of isoquants. An isoquant slope downward to the right. An isoquant slope downward to the right. This implies that the isoquant is the negatively sloped curve. This is because when the quantify of factor K or capital is increased, the quantify of L or labor must be reduced so as keep the same level of output. Second, an isoquant is convex to origin. Isoquants are convex to the origin. This is because the operation of the principle of diminishing marginal rate of technical substitution, or MRTS. MRTS is the rate of which marginal unit of an input can be substituted for another input, making the level of output remain the same. Third, an isoquant is smooth and continuous. Last, two isoquants do not enter. Types of isoquants. The production isoquants may assume various shapes depending on the degree of substitutability of factors. Linear isoquant. This type assumes perfect substitutability of factors of production. A given commodity may be produced by using only capital or only labor or by infinite combination of K and L. Linear isoquant implies that either factor can be used in proportion. Input-output isoquant. This assumes strict complementary, that is zero substitutability of the factors of production. There is only one method of production for any one commodity. The isoquant takes the shape of the right angle. This type of isoquant is called Leontief isoquant. Input-output isoquant is a concave line plotted on the graph, showing on all the various combination of two inputs that result of the same amount of output. King-Gate isoquant. This assumes limited substitutability of K and L. Generally, there are few processes for producing any one commodity. Substitutability of factors is possible only at the King's. It also called activity analysis isoquant or linear programming is 1 because it is basically used in linear programming. King isoquants. Each commodity is produced using only a few different processes. Only the kings of factors substitutability possible. This kind is also known as activity analysis isoquant or linear programming isoquants since it mostly uses a linear programming. Less cost combination of inputs. A given level of outputs can be reduced using many different combinations of two variable inputs. In choosing between the two resources, the saving of resource replaced by B must be greater than the cost of resource added. The principle of least cost combination states that if two input factors are considered for a given output, then the less cost combination will have inverse price ratio, which is equal to their marginal rate of substitution. That's all.